Today's show is sponsored by SCHIIT Audio. SCHIIT Audio designs and builds audio components made in the USA. Based in Valencia, California, their wide line of amps, DACs, and audio accessories fit any budget, starting at $49. For a full rundown of all their products, visit SCHIITdotCOM or stop by their retail store in Old Newhall, just north of Los Angeles. That's SCHIIT.com. What's going on, team? Also a sponsor of today's show, ZUAUDIO. That's ZUAUDIO.com. Fine makers of loudspeakers, cables, and cartridges. They design it, they make it, they build it, they paint it. They do all that good stuff, and most importantly, they love what they do, right? They're really passionate guys about audio. They make it in the US, in Ogden, Utah. They actually do a really good job of delivering a range of loudspeakers for all budgets, starting with the budget-conscious Omen, the floor standard, great speaker, scaling all the way up to now, the Dominance. There is indeed another audio show this weekend, November 1 through 3, called Capital Audio Fest, and Zoo will be there. Stop by the room and say hi. Tell them the occasional podcast sent you over. But also, while you're there, check out the new flagship coming out, the Dominance Mark II. Dominance Mark II. Huge flagship reveal. Really exciting stuff at the show. So stop by, say hi, check out the new flagship. It's going to be a treat, I'm sure. And don't forget to check out all the stuff on their website, ZUAUDIO.com. Also sponsors of all the part-time audiophile show coverage from Capital Audio Fest. Don't forget to check out Verdant Audio in room 525 and Tenacious Sound 315, 317, and Suite 319. Everybody, welcome to the show. Maybe I should just stop doing the podcasting and start a singing career, Bees. What do you think?
Kung Fu fighting, which I was listening to Howard Stern last time I was in a rent-a-car, and he says that's the worst song ever recorded. Everybody was a Kung Fu fighting, and then people kept calling in with like worst songs. I'm like, yeah, Kung Fu fighting is not the worst song ever recorded.
What is the worst song to you?
Baby Shark. Which I hear every morning. And before that, it was "Let It Go" by Elsa.
Yeah, there you go. I've actually never heard you sing before, so that was kind of
a treat.
Horrifying. That was kind of a treat for all of us.
Please edit that out. People turning off
already.
Podcasts.
Don't leave just yet. We promise that's the only time it's going to happen. Here we are, Season 3, Episode 4. Today we're going to tackle two awesome, fun things. First off, we have a Qobuz interview with the two US Qobuz guys. Very exciting stuff.
Dos Qobuz.
We sat down with them at a recent audio show. Great fun, great service, high resolution streaming. Who doesn't love it? And to tie directly into that, another digital technology. We just kind of wanted to give you a blueprint for a path for the, wireless audio for the hi-fi enthusiast. Now, the number one reason I think people want to get into a wireless connection for their headphones is that it's convenient.
Yes.
There's no wire.
Yeah.
You just click on things.
It's not messy. Yeah. Pop them in and push play.
Now, Bluetooth audio has made some leaps in quality with advancements of protocols like aptX and other kind of these higher bandwidth, but it is still a lossy connection in that it loses some information as we stick the stream through the pipe. So
I take it some high-end audiophiles aren't too happy with that aspect of it.
Well, I mean, anything that's lossy is not great, but it's not horrible. That's the thing. It's not horrible, and it's getting there. But I think in terms of really being picky, really being niche, and if you listen, the number one thing as a result of this Bluetooth connection that I hear is that the noise floor is usually very high. So if nothing is playing, you hear something.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, that makes sense.
And what does that do, Bees? That reduces the dynamics overall because
I want dynamics.
You don't have a black background for these sounds to jump out of.
Makes sense to me.
So it lets you know that you're not listening to nothing. And it also, affects the kind of jump, the dynamics, the fun kind of sound that's lively and energetic. Also, I've noticed, and this is just for a couple, but maybe not everyone, There's actual EQ changes. Sometimes I'll have a wired headphone come in that can be wired or Bluetooth, and when I listen to the Bluetooth,
really, okay, that's fascinating.
It's not just the fidelity. The EQ actually changes, and it usually takes the form of more bass. All of a sudden, there's like no bass, and then I put it through Bluetooth, and there's a ton of bass. Now, you can adjust this, of course, in the EQ settings in a lot of phones and all that, but I'm just saying it affects it in some way sometimes. Not just the sound quality, but the actual EQ sweep gets modified over Bluetooth. Yeah. So another one of the major negatives, unfortunately, is battery life.
Yeah. So I'm in the market for buying some wireless headphones, and I'm on flights a lot, especially across country, going to New York or Baltimore or Philadelphia. And those are 5+ hour journeys. Now, the ones that we're going to talk about, one of them does have, two of them have more than 5+ hours and 2 of them don't. So that definitely is going to play into what I'm purchasing, because the last thing I want to do is have an hour left and I can't watch the rest of my Avengers movie.
And we have to mention the gold standard, of course, the one that everybody has in LA. I mean, really has in LA, of course, is the Apple AirPods.
Which I was shocked. You looked it up. How long is the battery life?
And the gold standard is only 5 hours of playback and 3 hours of talk.
So I may just be out of luck. That's just what it is.
Currently, unless we get some nuclear-powered technology up in there.
So I will say, and I've never tested the Apple's version. How is the sound on those? Do you know? Have you tested them?
I have never heard a pair, unfortunately. As a reviewer, I have not heard them, and I do apologize for that.
Is there an aspect that they're shunned because they're mass marketed?
Well, they're just very, very popular. When you walk around downtown LA, every single kid has one as a status symbol, just like Beats. It's like replaced the Beats for a lot of the young adult crowd.
I see them all the time. I feel like I was actually ordering a birthday cake yesterday at Hanson's, and every single person behind the counter had them in.
Yeah.
And you don't know, can they hear me? Are they listening? But I guess that's like the new thing. They're just people just going to have those things in their ears.
But the other thing is they work. Like Apple's ecosystem, they're very easy to connect. And I will say this, I won't specify who, but we were just doing a listen of all these Bluetooth ones, and some of them didn't work. You know, the fact that it works.
That would be highly annoying, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, like we were doing it for a test. It's not a big deal. But like if I'm on the go, I want
it's got to work.
Yeah. Connect and work. You want to talk about what we listen to?
So we got a couple of types of headphones in the category section of these headphones to alleviate the battery life issue. There is a type that kind of before we got into what they call true wireless. That's the phase we're in now. There was a around the collar version. Still out there, still available. The benefits are pretty simple. The bigger size, it goes around your neck, either with a battery pack in the back or around the front of this collar that you wear. It gives you longer battery life. So we got like 18 hours, 15 hours, maybe even 20 hours of battery. And the antenna can be bigger and better. So the range is better. And now I will say this. I did do a distance test.
Yeah.
And these guys will go really pretty long ways. I mean, almost all over the house.
Gotcha.
All across, through walls, the whole nine. So I don't really think that we've gotten to a point where range is not really an issue. But if you're going to, I don't know, run around a track with that hold it. You got to have the source on you. You can't run away from it.
I would never use these for something that. I mean, I guess if you're charging your phone and you walked away from it, I guess I could see that. But most of the time, my phone's in my pocket.
Yeah. So then you have true wireless.
True.
Because it was.
So is that a new term that came out when these?
Well, they're actually called true wireless in the product name. It was a phase, but it still depends on what your needs are, what you really want.
Sure.
So true also we don't want to leave out the last one, which would be there's actually on-ear or around-ear full-size headphones, of course, that have the Bluetooth capability. They have very long life because they have much more space. Sometimes they're a little bit bulkier or heavier, but not always. And they're full-size headphones, but they have wireless in them. And there's a lot of those. So there's a lot of options. And they all have varying sounds. So the thing to remember as an audiophile is that they can sound okay. They can sound even good, but they're not going to give you the level of fidelity that a wire where it's just not there yet.
Right.
But it's still fun. And, of course, the number one thing is convenience.
Yeah, they're functional.
And they're functional. Also, if you have wired headphones and you want Bluetooth connectivity, there are also a lot of Bluetooth connectors that make use of wireless. You can just
I didn't know that. That makes sense, yeah.
So there are some sticks that do what they call a 3.5 millimeter connection.
Okay.
Like in Noble Audio, they used to sell this tiny little stick that you just clip to your shirt, and then you plug it in, and then it wirelessly goes. Also, there's in-ear monitors that do a cable around the back of the head. They have a lot of these different cables for the custom guys or even the universal fit. The bigger companies will each have their own Bluetooth cable that just instead of like having a wire come down, it goes around and does wireless. Now, these are more of the high end of portable audio because ultimately these headphones can cost like $5, $6, $7, $8, $1,000, couple thousand. So, yeah, everybody's got their version of the Bluetooth cable. Not everyone has one of these, but a couple of the big guys do. And the one that we have in the shop here today is actually the Ultimate Ears version and the UE Live, their flagship. So we're going to go ahead and call that the high end of this category, where we're looking at a couple $1,000s for the earpiece and then a single Bluetooth wire that goes from one ear to the other. Also important to think about, if there is any delay at all, I'm not saying there is, it affects the imaging, how sharp that image is. And the true wireless ones, they're not wired together, so they each have their own signal. So if something gets out of whack, it could affect fidelity. I'm not saying it does. I'm just saying there's more of a probability for some fine-tuned focused fidelity issues. Than if there's an actual wire connecting the two together. So in the case of the UE Live, you can have the Bluetooth cable, it pops right off, or you can put a regular wired cable in if you're going that route. And then they also have a third one, which has the controls. The universal connector allows for like 3 different types of cables. So they really have all the bases covered. They thought it out. It's, for musicians and audiophiles. So they kind of got it all worked out. Now, in the shop today, we have the RHA True Wireless, Sennheiser True Wireless, V-Moda, Forza, Mattello Wireless, and the one more triple driver Bluetooth, and one more. Now, unfortunately, the one more triple driver Bluetooth has been discontinued.
We looked it up to see what price it was, and you can't buy it.
But they did recently release...
But we listened to it, so we're going to talk about it.
They did also release a True Wireless.
Okay.
So they have a True Wireless version now.
So does that mean that's what we're moving towards, right?
And it was weird because at CES one year, they just all had the collared versions, and then the Sennheiser one was the only one that I caught. That's like the first True Wireless. I'm like, guys...
Yeah,
Apple did this 2 years ago. Yeah. It is really kind of a story of playing catch up to Apple in a weird way. Now, there's been cheapos out there, and you can buy some of these True Wireless ones for like $15. China will make you one.
Okay.
I'm just doing with the brands that I'm familiar with. I know these guys make decent wired products. So we're testing their capabilities, their chops on the wireless front. But if you just want convenience, you don't care about sound, why you listen to this podcast, I gotta say.
Who are you? Push pause on your wireless iPods.
The RHA True Wireless, super fun, come with a case, 5 hours of listening time, 20 hours of playback when you put them in the case. So that's something we didn't mention before. They only have 5 hours of listening time, but the case charges them.
Yeah. I think it looks slick. These were my favorite out of all of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I love the presentation. It actually, speaking of Apple, it just has, even though they're all black and not white, it has like a very intuitive way the case opens. I like how the headphones sit inside the case.
How about the fit?
The fit was the best out of all of them for me. And because I think the fit was better, the sound also sounded better to me. It was just playing through the Bluetooth through the iPhone. I was a little hesitant when I first saw them because all of them are bigger than what I've seen from Apple, but they kind of like screw into your ears. What do you call that?
It's a locking fit.
The locking fit. I wasn't aware of that, and it totally works. Especially with these. They didn't feel bulky when they were in my ears. The controls that are very slight on either side seemed to work just fine. I didn't have any issues. They were intuitive. I don't know. Overall, these were my favorites. The only down thing is that they only last 5 hours. So, but that's across the board. So that's just how it is on the True Wireless. And what was your thought?
I think they sound good. I agree on all your points. The fit is when you look at the shape, I think that the fit, you think it's not going to work, but it works.
It totally works.
Yeah.
It was almost a little bit of a surprise when you showed me how to do it.
Because when it sits in your ear, the piece, these actually have a stem that come down a little bit, and that stem faces downward towards your mouth. But when it's in that position, it sits in your ear really well. Now, the other ones that ironically, the Sennheiser True Wireless, I feel like they also work really well, but they sit up in your ear.
Yeah.
They fill the part of your above the nozzle that goes into your ear. I like the sound of these. The range was really good. I would say they're a little bit bulkier. The touch surface of the controls, I think we didn't mention this, it can be a little
intimidating at first, but I think it's something you just got to get used to. You just got to figure out how it works.
You got to memorize the commands. So this usually with around the neck, there is separate buttons for each thing. That's very self-explanatory. You're used to it. These, they just have one button on each side,
and it's where you touch it. It's how you touch it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you just again, if you fall in love with the way that it sounds, I would think that
you'll memorize how it works.
Yeah, after a few minutes, you got it. The Sennheiser, I didn't like as much. Like you said, they fit up. I felt like they were going to fall out of my ears anytime, even though they didn't. I kind of shook my head. They didn't actually fall out, but I just kind of felt like they might. But the one thing I really liked about them, which the RHAs didn't have, is when you take them out, it knows you take it out and it pauses your phone. So you literally can take them out, pull the phone out and pause it or whatever you need to do. You really like the way the case looks. It looks fine. It has kind of a nice hipster look to it. And they sit in there kind of nice. But yeah, that was one thing I liked.
Yeah. So
and all of these you can talk, right? Like all of these you can be on the phone and talk to them, right? They have microphones, correct?
That is correct. They have microphones, and some of them even have a feature where you can hear ambient sounds through a microphone, and it drains it into the earphone. So if your boss comes up to you, you can touch it and be like, "Yes, I'm working on the TPS reports."
Yes, no problem. And I know on these, and maybe the RHAs have these too. When I was messing around with the buttons, Siri popped up on one of them. So there's a lot of functionality.
I'm pretty sure every single one.
Now the battery power is even less on this one. This one is 4 hours, which would be an issue for me.
But that's just with the individual playback. It gives you another 8 hours with the case.
Right. But the RHAs gave you 20 hours with the case, right?
That is correct.
4 charges.
Now, the two around the collar ones that we tested, of those two, I do think that the V-Moda is onto something because there's an extra feature in the V-Modas that I find clever, and that is it vibrates.
Yeah, if someone calls you or...
And the range is really good, and it's kind of got it has a waterproof design to it.
Oh, it does? Okay.
Yeah, and it can go underneath the collar of a collar shirt so no one sees it. I think it's got a lot of wins in terms of the design elements, but... I think of the overall sound, it's not the best sound of these, but it is still good.
It sounded good. It sounded
okay.
My big thing is that if I'm going to go wireless, I literally don't want any wires. And both these collars have wires. I mean, I know they're slight, but they're also a little more bulky. I mean, the regular headphones that I have can fit in my pocket very easily. I guess these two could too, but I understand why the industry is moving towards true wireless.
It's easy to see when you start using them.
Yeah. There's just a little more to it.
Yeah. And for me, if you're going to go the convenience route, why don't you give yourself true convenience? Because it sounds ridiculous. That's why the word true is in the wireless, because it's like it's wireless, but it's not really. I mean, it's mobile from the source, but not truly wireless. But like I said, battery life, I think the application can be working out.
Sure.
So in this case, if it falls out of your ears, you're not going to lose it.
Yeah. And the battery. I mean, the batteries, that's definitely a consideration.
And I will say this, unfortunately, at the last audio show, right as I was leaving, I found one of those Apple earbuds just sitting on the ground.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm sure it happens all the time.
And it's going to be it's a lot harder to lose these guys.
No, you're not losing that. You're going to know if that fell off your phone.
Yeah, I think the working out application is more legit. Like I don't want to.
What did you think of the sound on the One More?
I think it's decent. The triple driver for $99 that they made a couple of years ago. This is kind of based around. Is an excellent earphone for $99. I think it's even cheaper now. So I like the base where they started from. I do think that it is more bulky, and the weight is at the front of the collar. which I think is not as ideal.
Because it pulls on
the back a
wires.
little bit more.
Yeah.
The design of the other one, the V-Moda, is on the back.
That's interesting. Okay.
So it balances better, I guess is what I'm saying.
Sure.
Now, I do like the controls are big. The buttons are huge. You'll never miss them.
Right.
So you're not fumbling around as much. I just think it's not as refined. It's not. They're not making it anymore.
Yeah.
My guess is maybe it wasn't a big seller for them, but maybe it was.
Yeah.
Maybe they just went
Or it was
true
just
wireless.
a stepping stone onto the true wireless.
A
We also didn't
placeholder.
talk about the price point on another great thing about the RHAs is that they're only $170. The Sennheisers are $250, right? So that's a difference. It's almost $100 difference. So, or $80.
I think though, for those audiophiles who have a little bit of cash to spill, my recommendation is
Yes. Ooh, what?
Ultimate Ears. So I just got these UE Live customs in.
Ooh, why don't I get to listen to them?
Because
They don't fit my ears, do they?
They don't
'Cause
fit
they're
in yours.
custom.
They're
God forbid.
very-
Am I even allowed to look at them?
You can look at them. They're very
Do not
pricey,
touch.
but they are a really rich sound in the mids. I would say the bass is a little bit elevated, not a lot, but for me, that's like the go-to signature is a little bit elevated in the bass. They have a good rich mids. They don't have as much treble. If you're a huge treble person, there might be some more options out there, but this particular headphone has a very easy to listen to signature that I love. So they also have the UE IPX Bluetooth cable that connects the two, and that gives me the best results and the best fidelity in terms of total output, mostly because the earphone sounds so good that I love it. And then also the Bluetooth cable just goes around the back of your neck. So in a way, it is like the collar, but it's just a cable. There's nothing else. It has a little module like halfway in between, and that's it. So my vote, but also by far the most expensive option would be the UE Live Customs paired with the IPX Bluetooth cable. Expensive things are so fun sometimes. But this is the most shoehorned segue ever, Bees, I got to tell you. But I would like to say that when we did our listening through the Qobuz app, and on the iPhone, the app is self-aware of the bandwidth limits.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, when I tried to up it, it said it won't do it.
It won't do it. It'll do it, I think. I didn't.
No, it had
a
whole thing came up of like what you need to do it.
So it doesn't make you. It's
outside.
It's honest.
It's like
because the bandwidth will definitely not the high res will not make it through to the earphone.
Sure.
So it's saying, hey, FYI, you're going to use up more data. You're going to use up more space. And it will be all for naught because it's not going to make it through the hole. So it'll drag the system down. And so, anyways, before you try to switch it over to high res while you're listening to Bluetooth. It gives you a warning. Very clever, very thoughtful, and helpful because you won't have as much system drag when you're doing high res for nothing. So good job, guys at Qobuz.
Yeah, seriously.
And now we have two gentlemen on the U.S. side of Qobuz, David Solomon and Dan Mackta.
Punch it.
Everybody, thanks for joining today. Very special guests, Qobuz guys, Dan Mackta, David Solomon. How the hell are you guys?
Doing great, man. We're in sunny Southern California at Can Jam 2019. Everybody's using Qobuz, and we are having a total blast.
You know, you guys have been on a tear. I've seen you at all the shows. It's since the launch. So how long have we been in the market now? Because it was the company started. It was abroad. Where are you guys based out of originally?
Started in France, actually like over 10 years ago as a download store. And it evolved and changed, and they launched the lossless and high-res streaming in Europe in 2015.
Yeah.
So a couple of years under their belts, and then launched just earlier this year in the U.S. market. But we started about a year...
Valentine's Day.
Yeah, we did on Valentine's Day. We were going to launch on February 15th, and David said, well, if you can do the 15th, you can do the 14th. And that means Valentine's Day launch, and we'll never forget. And he was absolutely right. But we started in the U.S. about a year ago, actually, sponsoring and showing up at, audio shows even before our launch to, kind of let folks know we were coming and set the stage and get the name out there. And since we launched in February, we've done a number of shows. This is the first Can Jam since we're actually live in the U.S., so it's super exciting.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me is that, I think David had mentioned this too, that he's like a digital audio evangelist. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm to quote your own words back to you, I think it was that you love the fact that your job entitles you to help put great music in the hands of everybody. And I think... Is that close?
Yeah, no, it is.
In that there is a certain, aspect of altruism here that we suffered so hardly at the hand of Napster and low resolution that we're finally getting to the point where two companies can go into a market and say, hey, high res is a thing and we should all have it. And the infrastructure is in place. And what kind of of that trip do you guys kind of feel like you're at? Because here we are, and we're there, and it's been a while. It's been a long time coming. What is it about the high res that inspires you guys to kind of choose this path? Because you're not here by accident. We just fall in this room together. You guys chose this in one way or another. What is it about that you kind of find exciting?
Bottom line is realism. And it's getting the recordings are getting better and better, and the better the recording, the more people enjoy it. The really cool thing I like about this whole Can Jam thing is even with sort of a moderate pair of headphones, it's really, really easy to detect all of the extra information that are in our files. And you were talking about Napster and all of the way that this thing all started off, Pandora and the lower resolution streaming things. I never even took them serious. I mean, it was tons of quantity, but the algorithms, the compression that they were using was just, to me at least, so bad that I never took them serious. The first streaming service that I took serious was a company called Mog. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that? David Hyman came up with this thing, and I got to tell you, I fell in love with it. I liked the service and the way that it worked, but really what it showed me was that, something, at some point, this is going to be at 1644, because we had gone from 64 kilobits per second when XM and Sirius started, and then we went to 128 and then 192, and you're going, God, this really still is pretty bad. And then Apple came out with 256, and Brian, I swear, I could not believe people were actually buying.
Right.
These,
for $1 each.
For a $1, and then $1.29 each, and I'm thinking, this is hard. Well, then this little company came out, Mog, and they started streaming at 320. I believe that was before Spotify even, and all of a sudden I'm going, man, there are some real possibilities here. And you were talking to people like 7, 8, 9 years ago, and you were going, well, yeah, at some point this is going to turn into full bit. People would look at you and go, you are nuts. It's never going to be full bit. CDs will always live. And I'm thinking, no, it's not going to happen like this. And now we're not at 64, 128, 192, or even 320. Right now, Qobuz is streaming at over 9,000 kilobits per second. And the reason that I'm using kilobits per second is because I hate switching from kilobits per second when you're talking about MP3s to 192 when you're talking about super high resolution audio. It just gets super confusing, so that's why I'm keeping it at that. But yeah, man, right now all planets are aligning perfectly. Everybody's got 50, 60 megabits per second download speed now. And a ton of us have got Scandinavian speeds. I'm just about to do 1,000 up, 1,000 down. So none of that's any problem anymore. And the only other reason that MP3s ever existed was space.
Yeah.
And we kind of don't have that problem anymore either. So there's really no reason for MP3s really to exist in any fashion other than they are cheaper to lease from the record labels than the higher resolution stuff. So the more high resolution stuff you have, the more you end up paying as a company. But at Qobuz, we feel like it's worth it because it just sounds so much better.
Do you guys foresee a future where downloads are just completely out of the picture and everything is streamed, or?
Well, it's going to be a long time from now. I mean, some people who have gotten in the habit of paid downloads, whether they're whatever format, but certainly, high-res 24-bit FLAC downloads is a pretty big market. Mm-hmm. And companies will probably continue to exist to serve them. I mean, Qobuz has no plans to stop selling downloads. Mm-hmm. It's going to be increasingly niche. I don't think there's a new generation of paid downloaders coming up.
That's a really good point.
I mean, it's just not happening. It's
the
just not happening.
Legacy people will always kind of, adhere to that kind of mentality, just like, vinyl never died. But I don't foresee like a resurgence like we've seen in vinyl for downloads.
I mean, who knows? Who knows? But I think, maybe some, if new companies come into the space doing paid downloads, they'll be niche, highly specialized, and that's where the opportunities will be in the corners, and we're just going to continue to super serve the audiophiles and give them what they are looking for as long as they're looking for it. In terms of the mainstream listener, it's been dying a pretty quick death. I mean, the whole thing about iTunes going away is kind of exaggerated. Like, I think the iTunes interface is changing, but they're still going to sell downloads. They've said that they're not. Mm-hmm. Apple is going to continue selling downloads. So.
Yeah, why would you if they're making? I mean, they've got to be making bank on $1.29 a song at 256 kilobits per second. Here's the really cool thing about our downloads. If you are into it, you can get them all the way up to 24,192, or like we were talking about before, over 9,000 kilobits per second. Mm-hmm. Really, really high resolution stuff. And if you're a member of our Sublime Plus, you're buying those things for about the same price as you're buying from iTunes. So over 9,000K as opposed to 256 kilobits per second at about the same price is just absolutely crazy. So if you are one of those downloaders, if you download a couple albums a month, pretty much already paid for your subscription.
And just for those curious about that downloading scenario, are the downloads that you buy through the storefront are they locked into the app, or can you? No. They're just like you get the file and you can play through anything.
You can download it in any format, any bit rate you want. So if you're an ALAC person or a WAV person or a FLAC person, you have choices to download it, and
you do it. It's your file, just like you do it from anybody else. Yeah. Except it's like not nearly the same kind of price.
Yeah, it's a good value. And, for people who have been buying high-res downloads for the last few years and spent a fortune on it because they are 25, 30, 40, $50 an album, the Qobuz subscription plan and being able to access all that same music plus hundreds of thousands of more albums for the price of basically one high-res album a month is... for people that haven't already embraced streaming and haven't gotten into it, it's pretty eye-opening that there's that much, like we say, it's like drinking from a fire hose all of a sudden with so much great high-res to listen to. Then, if you are a downloader, you can buy stuff right from in the streaming service. If you if you want to use it as a way to sample and then buy what you're interested in, it's all seamlessly integrated right into the service. So,
since high-res makes up so much of the mantra of Qobuz, is the idea that you're the premium high-resolution service, is it that just a thing that exists for audiophiles and that you want to be ahead of the curve when the rest of everybody else catches up? Or is this a thing that you guys feel is marketable at this moment in time?
Absolutely.
To the masses?
Absolutely. It's just a matter of time. Everything starts small. I mean, when we first started streaming, if you were streaming at 64 kilobits per second. Mm-hmm. Then if you were streaming, it was $1.28. I mean, it's going to continue to expand. And the one thing that we need to probably know about the United States, at any rate, is even though streaming has been available for quite some time, the infrastructure really hasn't been there. So almost everybody that's streaming right now is streaming at sort of a topping out at 320 kilobits per second, or about a third of the resolution of a regular CD. Now that the infrastructure is kind of finally here, there's no, like I say, there's really absolutely zero reason for MP3. So will it continue to get better? Yeah. Will more and more people come? They will, because in this market we are truly in our infancy. So this is kind of like your first car, right? So you had a beater for your first car. Mine was like a 65 Pontiac Le Mans, right? But that's not what I'm driving now. So I start driving an MP3. But now when I start, oh, wow, gosh, now there's a better MP3 car that I can get. I bought my better MP3 car. And then at some point, I went to a full resolution car, and it's really cool. So the whole point behind this is, like, we are at our infancy. We're on our first or second car. We're just about... Everybody's going to be able to have a Bugatti for not a lot of money, right? And it's not even really very expensive to do this.
I would love a Bugatti, but the imminent arrival of 5G wireless is the other kind of tipping point that will make lossless and or high res streaming much more available to folks that need to be able to listen to their music when on mobile without taking any extra steps. That's going to become nothing. Within whatever the timeline is, months or years, depending on where you live in the country. But that's coming, and to be honest, the aspirations of Qobuz specifically are really to just be the streaming service for the high end of the market. I mean, we don't think of ourselves as coming in to compete with Spotify or Apple or the kind of mainstream services. They're trying to be all things to all people. Yeah. And doing a pretty damn good job of it. And for the vast majority of the population, they just don't, even if they think that they're music fans, they don't really care about the music enough to, in many cases, even spend $1 on it. I mean, it's just something free, and it's a beautiful thing that music flows like water, and it's more accessible than it's ever been. That's great. Music is what why we're in it and what we really care about. But there's a segment of the market that's going to grow as streaming continues to grow. It's just natural that this segment is going to get stronger, and more people will realize, hey, if there is something better, I want it, right? That's kind of the American way.
That's a really good point. The first time you hear high resolution, especially if you've been one of these guys that the only thing that you've ever heard is compressed music, all of a sudden there's a new world that is opened up to you. Once you hear high resolution, you can't unhear it. You can't... I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. Once you hear that high-res version, if you ever hear the low-res version, I've got a perfect example for you. About 3 years ago, I bought an album. It was released in, believe it or not, like 1957. It's an Illinois Jacquette. It's called The Swing of Things. I bought this thing for like $60. Yeah, it was a 20. I think it was a 24,192, or maybe it's 24,96 download. I spent like $60 for this thing. It's been a prized possession for me. And whenever I hear like the 16-bit version of this thing, I'm going. I mean, it's immediate. You can tell so quickly, and you're disappointed because it's just not even close to the same experience because I can't unhear that. And I'll give you an example of that because high res, to people that have never heard it, is a bit of it's a bit out there. It's not a real solid concept. So just to try to make it a little more understandable, high resolution is not huge things. It's a bunch of tiny things, right? There's nothing huge that happens in high resolution. It's that nth degree of detail. It's that nth degree of decay of the symbol, or even the room sound. Audiophiles call that air around the instruments, right?
Air,
yeah. And really, all it is more what you would hear if you were really there. More of what the musician recorded while they were in that room. And once you hear that, you just cannot unhear it. And so what I think is going to happen is more and more people will start to hear this. And then it's going to be pretty obvious that at some point you're not at the cool kids table if you're listening to MP3. Why would you be? Because you're missing so much. And so when I say it's a big difference with small details, That's exactly what it is. And this is the best way I've ever thought to explain high resolution. But what it really is in a nutshell is millions and millions of tiny, tiny details that combine to really give you a very realistic or a more realistic presentation of the music than you would hear if it were not high res.
Yeah, I think that the single word that brings it down for me is realism. It's like all of a sudden things sound more like you're used to hearing them in a natural setting. And like you said, that includes room sounds. And when you're just listening, because let's be honest, listening to two things come out of two speakers to your ears is very unnatural compared to the ambience that you always take in. And this is a very subtle thing, I think, a lot of times, where your brain is just always running to give you, geolocation around you and all of these type of cues that you're not necessarily aware of. But when you listen high res, more of that information is there. It becomes more real to your brain, and it translates. It's not just numbers and graphs. Your brain translates it to a thing that just is more pleasurable because it's closer to what you're used to.
And certainly when you're talking about, lossy streaming, lossy compression, MP3, I mean, I'm not a scientist on this stuff, but I do really believe that, there's some scientific tomfoolery with the format where your brain has to do some decoding to make it sound like it's supposed to sound, right? That's how it works. It's fooling your brain into thinking certain things are there. And I think that work that your brain has to do to unfold the MP3 in a way, I think subtly detracts from the power that music has, and like Neil Young was saying in the Pono days, like the emotional content. Like it's not, it sounds kind of crazy just talking about it, but when you hear it, it's undeniable when you go from lossy to lossless and or even better high res. But it's just the fact that your brain is just able to process without an intermediate step. Things give so much more pleasure to the listening experience, and you don't need tens of thousands of dollars worth of audio equipment to enjoy it. You can get away with upgrade from the earbuds that came with your phone maybe, but you don't have to spend a fortune to be able to really hear how good music can sound, and that's what's exciting. That's what gives me the energy every day, even if things are tough.
You accidentally ran a kid over on the way to work. Yeah, just took off.
but then I turned on some Qobuz in my car, and I heard a new high res release, and I didn't care about that kid anymore. I said, "What kid? What kid?"
Dan is right. I mean, we don't really talk about this very much about the legion that we've got working with us here at Qobuz in the United States. How many are we up to now, Dan? It's hard to keep up with.
The total Qobuz USA Army, the total force?
Yeah, the total force is
up to 4.5 people.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we're up to 4.5 people now. But everything that's been done so far has been done with 4 people. And I think the reason it's turning out so good is that we all just absolutely adore music. The other 3 people that are working with me all came from the music industry, and every single one of them have forgotten more about music than most people will ever know. So it's so thrilling to work with people like this. So we're not just doing this like, we're not going to work and we're roofing and coming home and complaining about our jobs. Every single one of us, we absolutely dig what we're doing, and we hope it's showing. And one of the ways that we're, trying to make this come into fruition for the industry, because we believe that the press and the dealers that are doing audio and the manufacturers that are doing audio, I can't believe that that's never been on the same plane or playing field with the streaming services. I'm going, look, we're doing the same thing. Why don't we all combine, and our message will be much stronger? So that's what Dan and I are doing right now, is we're basically partnering up with all of the manufacturers, all of the shows, the press. We're really trying to support this industry as much as we can, from sort of the midline headphone all the way up to the stratosphere.
I think that's an important point to make, because if you just look at it from a marketing standpoint, the service doesn't need to partner with audiophiles. You go out there, you can do a media buy.
Right.
You could try to find the mass niche that's the most likely candidate, and you could, like a lot of other headphone companies even do, like just completely abandon the audiophile because the segment isn't big enough. But the fact that you guys have come in here and made a conscious effort, I think is very admirable, because it may not be the largest group, but it is one that's going to be your core.
It's about the passion, too, and the passion for music and sound that makes Qobuz different to begin with. So I think that it's vital that we're here talking to people who share that passion. We know who our audience is. Like, again, we're not trying to be all things to all people. This is a music service for people that, are really into it, willing to pay something, maybe even willing to spend, a little bit more on a piece of equipment here and there. And we want to bring everybody along into this world where music just sounds so damn good and it brings so much pleasure. We know we're a niche service and we want to grow this segment. I mean, the idea is that, as big as Can Jam is this year, it should be twice as big next year, because the variety of products and a service like Qobuz and the awareness of quality and putting the message out, as an industry, seems like David was saying, the planets are aligning with the availability of the hardware, the bandwidth, the services, and what's been promised for so long is finally here.
And not only that, if we just talk about, and Dan's right, we're never going to be all things to all people, because there's going to be a price barrier for some. Some is $0, some is topping out at $10. But I absolutely know 100% of my soul that 10% of the Spotify users right now don't even know that a service like this exists. I guarantee you 10% or more of Spotify users are absolutely, or Pandora or Apple, they love music, and this is just the thing that they got turned on. They don't even know that there's something better. So Dan, another one of Dan and I's things that we're really trying to get going is education. Because really, it's like people just don't know. So we were just talking a little while ago about you can't unhear this stuff. Some people hear it and they just don't care. But some hear it and they go, oh my God, I've never heard anything like this in my life. I've got to have it. I know that there's 10% of those other companies, because we're in our infancy, that haven't heard that kind of stuff. And once they do, they're going to grow up and be, big kids at the big kid table.
I think just in a very overarching broad sense, there is a renewed sense of wanting to connect with something that seems real. Like we were talking about, to me, higher resolution is a more accurate representation of what is real. And that if you look at the surge in analog and vinyl, there is a yearning within the general populace, these small things that want something a little more realistic than the technological spin that we found ourselves in, where we're listening to iPods on earbuds and walking down the street and not paying attention to where we're going because we're just all on our phones and such. So I do think that with the factor of education involved, there is a segment of the population and a wave, a resurgence even, that's a response to what happened with the loss of quality and sound. And that it's just gonna continue to get bigger, because why else would people go out and start buying records out of nowhere all of a sudden?
Right. I mean, it's amazing that with all of the technological innovation that these massive companies do, that the average person is walking around listening to music that sounds infinitely worse than what I was listening to, like on my Walkman, analog, even on a cassette. Could have been better than what a 128 MP3 may sound like.
But those first days of Napster, when it came down so crispy, I was just like, I can't listen to it.
But a lot of people,
first my reaction,
right. But a lot of people didn't know and didn't care, and the convenience trumped everything. And I think we've kind of hit the peak convenience, short of having, a Spotify chip implanted right in our brains, which is probably coming for those who want it.
I've got one.
Of course, early adopters, I think, it hits that inflection point, like you said. Can't get any more convenient. Now all that can happen is the sound quality and the experience can get better.
That brings up a great point, because like in the 80s, if we would have come out with something like this in the 80s, I think it would have fallen flat on their face because the recordings at that point, they were still learning how to record digitally. Yeah. And frankly, most of them just gave me a headache. I mean, with the new whatever albums coming out, and even Donald Fagen stuff, it just sounded so stark and lifeless. I mean, it was crisp in there, but these days I'm finding that the recording engineers, whether it be from transfers, from original tapes, when they're doing all of these remasters that they're doing, remasters used to be a horrible word. I would run when I heard remaster because all they did was just crunch it down and made it louder.
And anything in the 80s or 90s, digital transfers weren't great. Yeah.
But now...
So when did it actually start to cascade back, do you guys think? Has it been only like the last 5 years, last 10?
I'm thinking last 10 years. You know, the people have started really learning how to record better in digital because it is a different process than recording an analog. And so when you've got, guys that have been recording analog for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, well, this is the same thing. You're just putting it on this format, and then you treat it the same way as you treated analog. No way. It's never going to come out right. That's why you heard all of the, let's say a rock album in the mid-'80s, I could almost tell you exactly what it sounded like, no matter who it was. It needs about 6 dB more bottom end, from about 60 to 80 cycles. And, please take some of that 3 kilohertz out of that thing because it's eating my head off. It's just, you almost knew what it was going to sound like. But if you did that exact same transfer onto an album, it's going to sound fantastic because that's just, you compensate. Well, you don't really need to compensate with digital. And so the engineers are getting incredible now, and more are doing the same. Like people like Cookie Marenko, right, at Blue Coast? Cookie's awesome.
You think they're ever going to bring the bass in on Injustice for All? I'm still waiting for that.
I know what he's talking about. Do you know?
Yeah, I want him. Okay. I want him.
Jason Newsted. It's because they were, he was the new kid, and so they decided not to give him any space. Well, listen, we are working on getting some Metallica high-res onto Qobuz. We don't have it yet because they control all the rights themselves, and it's a process. For sure. A process and a check. But we're working on it. I can't wait to hear it because right now they did remaster in high-res, but the only way you can get it is to buy it in downloads directly from them. Yeah. I don't know how we got a Metallica. Oh, you brought it up.
I once sat in on a meeting with XM Radio, and the guy who was giving the presentation, I said, well, I raised my hand and said, what about the sound quality? And he said, it's not a concern for our core consumer. Do you guys see that person is shifting, or are we creating new people through education?
Both, both. Because, XM isn't 64 kilobits per second, right? They're 128 or 192. I can't remember which.
It sounds horrible to my opinion.
Yeah, it does.
Well, it does, but it doesn't sound as bad as it used to. You used to couldn't even listen to voice on it.
Yes, I totally agree. The spoken word, the radio, talk.
That was even bad.
Well, because I think they've got a master thing, and they control the bandwidth of each channel based on, so that if Billy Joel is doing a live thing, they give him, they actually can control it and balance it.
It's a dynamic thing.
But whatever it is,
it's a quantity over quality for sure.
It's not for, is there something like when I say audiophile, I feel like that's up here, and then there's, this group undefined of people who should be and could easily be and probably would want to be if they knew about it, listening to something better.
Yeah.
And those people, I think, are right there to be educated and brought into, not necessarily the audiophile hobby per se, but the idea of spending a little bit more and caring a little bit more.
Yeah, forget about the audiophile thing. What I want people to do is just get the same experience that they had when they put on their albums on their Magnavox radio in the the early 80s or whatever. There's just a feeling there that there was something there that got lost in the first round of streaming, and it's still on the lower bandwidths, still lost. Now when you hear this, it's like, oh, okay. So, hey, it's just about education.
Well, we'll get some through education, and like I was saying before, as as big as streaming is, and in the U.S., it's the biggest country for streaming in the world, and it's growing exponentially. Still, half the population has never streamed. So, as big as it is,
Yeah.
It's not nearly as big as it could be, and the segmentation and differentiation in that market is naturally going to come. And Qobuz's role in that, I think, is to bring some people into the world of streaming who would otherwise never do it because they couldn't deal with the sound quality, like you guys were saying. And then also the other part of the mission is start to educate, a younger and broader audience about just the idea of quality.
Which is great for Can Jam. That's a perfect opportunity to start talking to people that are,
yeah.
not going to die in 10 years.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw some people in their 50s in the other room.
I think that of all the to bring it back to the audiophile experience, I feel like of all the audiophile tweaks out there that you can update in this, and there's endless possibilities, everything from the amp to the loudspeaker, whatever. The jump from low res to high res, to me at least, is audible across the entire thing. So if you don't have like you were saying earlier, if you don't have a huge expensive system, you can hear the difference. You can hear the air even with a not so expensive system. I would like to point out though that if you do upgrade your system, you will hear even more difference. So a lot of guys will think, I changed this one thing and I don't hear a difference. If you work it from the front to the back, if you work from the transducer all the way back, you hear even more of a change when you change something at the source level. And I think that is definitely abundant in the air, in the dimensionality of going from 2D, like a flat 2D with, like, if you put a towel over a speaker, to something that leaps out at you. And that all goes back to what I was saying earlier with realism, something that appears real, dimensional, in space. So yeah, if you can get, I say, hey, if you can get it, you can appreciate it. There are dividends to be earned, even at a pair of earbuds, at the earbud in your phone level. I do believe that from my experience, but there's even more to be found if you're really into the hobby and you have this more expensive chain to dive into.
Right. Well, if you've got a Ferrari, you're not going to put economy gas into it. You're going to put premium and not even wince, and so. That's where we sit. If you've got, Ferrari of sound systems, you got to put the best digital source, and that's going to be Qobuz. There's
Here's
no
the
question.
thing from a practical sense that people probably don't know, because if you read Bluetooth's whole front page, you would really think that these guys can do, pretty much high resolution. That's the way it looks on their front page. They mentioned 24-bit, they mentioned 96 kilohertz, and you're thinking, well, that's high resolution. A normal person would think that, but it's like maybe 350 kilobits. That's about all you're going to get out of Bluetooth. So the people that that's what they listen to, I tell them, look, either get our lowest service or get Spotify. There's no reason to get high resolution. But people don't even know this. So they do things that are marketed to them. I'll give you a perfect example. Last night we got into our rental, and it asks you every time, oh, you want to hook up your Bluetooth, and almost everybody go, oh yeah, that'll be really cool, I'll hook up my Bluetooth to it. I always go, no way, I'm not doing that. I plug in the USB connector, I plug directly into the phone, I'm always hardwired. And just that experience, Brian, is a night and day thing. So if I were listening to Bluetooth all the time, and that's all I ever planned on doing, and all I listen to in my car, I just tell people, look, just get Spotify. However, if you take that little cable that you've got you use to charge your phone with, and just hook that up every time, and use it hardwired instead of over the Bluetooth, it sounds immeasurably better. There is literally no comparison to the sound quality difference. But people don't know that. Oh, it's Bluetooth. Oh, I'll go ahead and hook it up to it. So, yeah, there's this huge education thing that sometimes technology isn't really better. It's really better if you can hardwire it every single time if you've got that opportunity.
So some of your competitors have chosen to go with a new file type or a new process of transferring called MQA.
Yeah.
Was that something that was ever part of the consideration set, to your knowledge, with Qobuz?
No, we were here before MQA was here. Yeah. So we were, how long have we been doing high res stream? I think that was in 2015, right?
Yeah, 2015.
That's when we started downloading or letting people download. So we had built up this huge library way before MQA was here. So we were already on a roll. Do we have anything against MQA? No, I don't have anything against MQA. It sounds fine. I listen to it quite frequently, the difference between MQA and our 24192 FLAC files. There's a little difference one way or the other. But look, if you're into high resolution, I think they've got something like, there's different numbers popping around, but sort of the highest number that they're popping around on titles, about 1 million cuts. We've got 2 million cuts. So if you're into this thing for high resolution, we're just by pretty long margin the best shot. And there's always going to be one guy or two guys. They're, oh no, I like one or the other because they're a team guy, right? Oh, I like MQA because I've always used it. I'm on the MQA team. Okay, God bless. Oh no, I like the FLAC stuff because I'm, on. Well, look, I got a pair of big Martin Logans that sit about 1 meter from my face at my desk. I can hear a gnat going across the soundstage if in fact a gnat went through the soundstage. And I listen to these all the time. They're both very good. You're not going to kick either one of them out of the bed for eating crackers. They both sound fantastic. If you didn't have one and you had the other, you'd be probably just fine. But look, if you gotta have a bottom line. If you're into it for high res, we're gonna cost you about $5 more, or $25 a month instead of 20. But we're gonna give you over 1 million more cuts of high resolution. That's not like twice as many from 10 to 20. That's like twice as many from 1 million to 2 million, right? If you started today listening to our high res, you would be dead before you finished. So, and then, oh my God. How many Dan? How many albums a week are we adding in high res? It's hundreds, right?
Yeah, I mean it's something like 1,000 albums a month in high res that are being released, like new stuff or reissues. So it's hundreds on a weekly basis.
And so Dan got, I don't know, maybe 10 different. Really, you're going to love this video when we put it out. But Dan got like 10 really hot engineer producer guys, and did some interviews with them just to ask them, what do you like about this? What don't you like about it? Why is high resolution important to you from the get-go, from the start when you're mixing this stuff? And these guys are absolutely fascinating, and they're just all into high resolution to where a few years ago they weren't. And one of the reasons that they weren't is really interesting because there's a lot of novices that, always say, well, why don't you just do it this way? Well, let's think about recording in high resolution 10 years ago. You got, 16 tracks of 2496 material for 5 minutes. How big are those files? They were so big that we didn't even really. You would have to have a supercomputer, which some of these guys did. But it just wasn't practical. Now it's so much more practical to record in high res and get really good at it. That, like I say, everything rises, and the recording portion of this is rising at an astonishing rate. And all of these really hot engineers now, they're all getting into it. And the ones that aren't, they're going to be into it really quickly because there's no denying how much better it sounds. And it's like, okay, now you've got the processing power. Now you got the hard drive space. Let's do this.
And the digital conversion technology has changed.
Oh, my gosh.
And
yeah,
I would have to say, it's been improving. Just the transfer, just like if you 20 years ago you had to get it from analog to digital somehow, and even if you bought the best thing, it was limited to what the quality was capable of, and now we're evolving. One of the things that MQA does talk about is going back to like the original masters, and it's this verified thing from end to end. What is the process for your high res capture in the terms of varying? How does it work exactly?
It's really complicated.
I mean, we get all of our content from the rights holders, from the record companies. So a record company is not going to release an album if the artist hasn't signed off on it. It just doesn't happen. So I would say that we guarantee that everything that streams on Qobuz is also official and endorsed by the artist, but you just have to take our word for it. We don't have a light that shows you that.
And it is fair to mention that the light costs you money, and there is somewhat of a closed walled garden around that. I mean, it has its benefits, and
it's a different way of doing it. The FLAC files that we stream, would generally be the exact same files that you would have bought on, for example, HD Tracks, a high-res download store. It's the same. It's just streaming versus bought and stored locally on your hard drive. So they're sourced from the official sources. We do not do any transfer, any upsampling. It comes in and we stream it exactly as it comes in. So as David was saying, there's 2 million plus tracks in high-res, 24-bit, but then, another 30 million, soon to be 40 million in 16-bit CD quality. The stuff that's not released in high-res streams lossless. So you have all the same music that you can listen to on one of the mainstream services, but it's all lossless, which is, as we've been saying, in and of itself is a huge, huge improvement. But it all comes directly from the rights holders. We do nothing to it. That includes the artwork and digital booklets if they supply it, all the metadata. We get as much as we can from the actual rights holders and use that to populate the service.
On Qobuz, you guys offer like different curated playlists, and there's a search ring. How are the playlists exactly curated, and is there like some magical algorithm that kind of works your radio stations as well?
Well, we have nothing like that. We actually don't have radio on Qobuz, although it's on the roadmap. Right now, there's nothing algorithmic in terms of the playlist. It's all done by humans. And there's customer demand for some algorithmic function and a radio function, so it's being introduced. But I think the original ethos of the service was kind of coming from a different place that, these listeners don't want a computer telling them what to listen to. They already know what's good when you're talking about these core audiophiles, which is true. But there's improvements coming to the service, including some better search functionality and more detailed granular search function, and then also some algorithmic stuff. But right now, there's a staff in the home office in France of music writers who compile playlists. We do it here as well. We hire music experts who are, journalists to do it. And then something that we do that's really interesting is we work directly with the hardware manufacturers. So, a Yamaha or an AudioQuest or a Grado or whoever, they create branded playlists with their recommendations for what makes their gear sound great, that they want their customers or potential customers to use to demo gear. And that's just another source of kind of authoritative music choices that line up with what audiophiles are interested in. So we're working closely with the industry on the curation as well to make sure we're putting stuff together that speaks to the people that are interested in, this higher end of the market.
Well, how do the price tiers exactly break out in terms of what you get?
Okay, there's one $300 model. I'm going to let Dan finish it out after this one. There's one, and that's the only way we sell it. It's like $300 a year. If you're the downloader, that's the one you get because that's going to allow you to buy the downloads super cheap. But if you figure that out, it's only like $25 a month.
So, and just to touch on that real quick, and I think you mentioned this earlier, the files that you get are actually unregulated FLAC files, right?
Oh, yeah.
You own them, do whatever you want with them if you buy them.
Right. Now, the last thing that I'll say about that, because I didn't get this in a little bit earlier when we were talking about the download crowd, I want that crowd to be absolutely huge by the end of this decade, and I'll tell you why. I think people have got an innate want, an innate desire to help artists out. Everybody knows that, look, you just don't make a lot in streaming. If you go to a concert, please buy their T-shirts. Please buy their albums. Support them some way, right? Because artists really need it these days. But look, if you're not doing any of this stuff, buy their download because we pay them the same way that a label would pay them at that point, and they're getting like full on money because it's the same thing. So it's not like
what you're saying is if you want to support your bands, buy the full album, download it, and they will get more money than if they just.
I don't even care if you use it or not.
Buy a track, but with paid downloads, everybody makes more than streaming.
Yeah, so there's this company in China called Tencent, And that's what they talk about. And they have got people downloading one album 10 times, not because they need it 10 times or they're giving it away or whatever. They're buying it because they want to support their artists. I think that is the coolest thing. And we've got a superb platform to do that with. So that's the $300 model. But most people get the...
Yeah, most people are not in for $300 a year. But the bottom line is anybody can try Qobuz for free. We've got a 1-month free trial. You go to ZUAUDIOdotCOM, sign up for an account, choose, Studio, which is the plan that most people pick. That's unlimited high-res streaming. Mm-hmm. So you get a free month, and then it's $24.99 a month, $25 a month. Discount if you go for a full year. But we encourage people to do the free trial and play with it and put it through your system and try it in a few different scenarios. And we're finding that the conversion rate is excellent. Once people hear it, they want it. If you are just looking for lossless and you don't care about high res, for example, maybe your house is wired with Sonos gear, which is great, but it only does 16 bits. Sonos does not support high res.
But hardly anybody that's got Sonos right now is using full bit. They're using like Spotify mainly.
Streaming. Yeah. So upgrade with our hi-fi plan, which is $19.99 a month, $20 a month, and that's the entire catalog streaming and lossless 16-bit.
Right,
which is great.
And so Sonos does, and this is what most people don't know. When I tell people this, they go, "Really? It does that?" Most people don't know that Sonos will sound just like a CD player if you handle it right. It is full 1644.
But you got to have the source. You got to have the source.
You got to have the source, right?
So those are our two most popular plans: Hi-Fi and Studio, either $20 or $25 a month. There's also a $10 a month plan, the oddly named Premium, which not really where we compete. I mean, it's a streaming MP3, 320 MP3 level. And if you take the sound quality out of it, the whole thing kind of doesn't hold together as well.
There's only one advantage to us with the 320 plan, and that's if you're really into Roon. And that, because some people are just into that whole music discovery thing with Roon. So if you're into music discovery and just, kind of basic sound quality, maybe you just don't hear so well, you can get our $10 thing, still use Roon, and then go deep into music.
We want to offer it if people are into everything else about the service. The sound quality is not as important. We've got a plan for them, but 95% of the customers in the U.S. so far have signed up for high-res or lossless levels. So I think that's where the real attraction is.
Me too.
Thank you guys so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
It's been a blast, Bryan. Thanks.